North Pennsylvania is a place where the woods swallow you whole. In Wellsboro, hunting isn't just a hobby, it's the town's beating heart. In November 2021, I headed out alone into the state gamelands. The air was a biting 30 degrees, and the silence was heavy. I had been hunting these ridges since I was 23 years old, but that morning felt different, like the forest was holding its breath. I didn't know then that I wasn't the only predator in those woods. What I encountered that day still makes my blood run cold.
It was 5:15 a.m. when I parked my truck by a rusted gate. A light dusting of snow covered the ground, perfect for tracking deer. I hiked 2 miles in toward an old, collapsed hunting cabin. Climbing into my tree stand, I waited for the first gray light. That's when I saw it. A cheap ladder stand just 60 yards away. It hadn't been there last week, and the snow around it was undisturbed. There were no tracks leading to it, just a single trail in the brush. It looked like someone had simply appeared out of thin air.
By 8 a.m., the sun was up, but the woods remained eerily still. Suddenly, movement caught my eye near a thick oak tree. It wasn't a deer. It was a man wearing a filthy gray hoodie. He wasn't dressed for the cold or the hunt. No camo, no orange. He stood perfectly still, staring directly up at me with dead eyes. Slowly, he raised his hand and gave me a rhythmic, mechanical wave. It wasn't a greeting. It was a sign that he had found me. Then, he stepped behind the tree and vanished into the shadows. I waited an hour, my heart hammering against my ribs, before descending. When I reached the spot where the man had stood, I froze. The snow was perfectly smooth. There were no footprints at all. I checked the mysterious ladder stand nearby, but it was caked in ice. It was impossible for anyone to have used it without leaving a mark. As I scanned the area, I noticed strips of orange cloth tied to branches. They were at different heights, forming a trail leading deeper into the pines. I realized then that I wasn't watching the woods. The woods were watching me.
Panic started to set in as I decided to head back to my truck. I cut through a thicket, only to find something that stopped me dead. My own backpack, which I'd left up in my tree stand, was on the ground. It was propped against a stump, wide open and completely emptied. My knife, my flashlight, and my spare bolts were laid out in a row. They were sorted by size and color with terrifying, obsessive precision. Whoever did this had been in my stand while I was checking the tracks. They were moving silently right under my nose, playing a sick game.
It was 1997 when a young urban explorer named Mark decided to climb the Hollywood Hills at night. He wasn't afraid of the city or the rough terrain, but he didn't know the legends. They say the Hollywood sign is haunted by the ghost of Peg Entwistle, an actress who tragically jumped to her death from the H in 1932. Mark reached the top and noticed a faint glow near the letter H. At first, he thought it was just the city lights reflecting off mist, but then he saw her. A figure, pale, delicate, staring down at him, her arms outstretched. He froze. The stories he'd laughed at in college suddenly made sense. Peg wasn't just a memory. She was there. He tried to run, but his feet felt rooted to the ground. The glow grew brighter, and whispers echoed around him. "Help me," they said. Panicked, Mark dropped his flashlight, and when he finally turned back to look, the figure was gone, leaving only the chilling silence and the sound of his own heartbeat.
I scrambled into the seat, fumbled the keys, and the engine roared to life. Before shifting into drive, I looked into the rearview mirror one last time. He was standing right at the edge of the tree line, barely 20 feet away. The gray hoodie was pulled low, but I could see that unsettling wide grin. He wasn't hiding anymore. He wanted me to see him in the full light. He slowly raised his hand, pointing a long, rusted screwdriver toward me. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he dragged his thumb across his throat. I didn't wait for a second gesture. I floored it, gravel spraying everywhere. I drove straight to the State Game Commission office, shaking and barely coherent. 2 officers followed me back to the site a few hours later with rifles drawn. We found a makeshift shelter hidden under a massive pile of brush and plastic. Inside were stacks of stolen gear, backpacks, binoculars, and even human hair. They found a collection of trophies taken from other hunters over the years. But the man in the gray hoodie was nowhere to be found in the area. There were no tracks leading away from the camp, just like in the snow. It was as if he had simply dissolved back into the Pennsylvania wilderness.
The police told me I was lucky to escape with my life that day. They believe he was a feral squatter living off the grid for decades. Locals call him the Woods Watcher, a ghost that haunts the state game lands. I never went back to Wellsboro to hunt, and I likely never will again. Sometimes at night, I wonder if he ever followed those papers to my house. I still find myself checking the locks on my doors 3 or 4 times. Because out there in the deep pines, the laws of man don't really apply. Just remember, when you're watching the woods, someone might be watching you.